So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start off the show today with, frankly, a rather frightening story. So, folks, this last weekend, the Guardian reporter who has written the majority of the reports stemming from Edward Snowden's NSA leaks, and I'm, of course, referring to Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald's husband and partner, a man by the name of David Miranda, was flying from Berlin, where he was staying with a fellow journalist and the filmmaker of the Snowden interviews, Laura Poitras. He was flying from Berlin to Brazil, where he lives with Greenwald. While he was changing planes in London at Heathrow, Miranda was actually detained and questioned by British authorities for 9 hours. For 9 hours, you heard me correctly. Now look, detaining a journalist for questioning is one thing. Detaining the family member of a journalist is another thing. It's a horrible act of intimidation, and we're going to discuss that further a little later on in the show. But how they did it, how they actually detained Miranda, that actually is even more frightening than the detaining of him itself, because it's really horrible. Reading from Greenwald's column at The Guardian, quote, "At 6:30 a.m. this morning, my time, 5:30 a.m. on the East Coast of the U.S., I received a telephone call from someone who identified himself as a security official at Heathrow Airport. He told me that my partner, David Miranda, had been detained at the London airport under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act of 2000. End quote. You heard that, folks. You heard that. His partner, his husband, was detained under the Terrorism Act. Terrorism. What exactly does that mean? What does this mean exactly? Reading on from Greenwald's column at The Guardian, quote, "At the time the security official called me, David had been detained for 3 hours. The security official told me that they had the right to detain him for up to 9 hours in order to question him, at which point they would either arrest and charge him or ask a court to extend the question time. The official, who refused to give his name but would only identify himself by his number 203654, said David was not allowed to have a lawyer present, nor would they allow me to talk to him." End quote. So just imagine this too, getting woken up that early in the morning and told that your significant other is being held under a terrorism act in another country. Just imagine that for a second. So they held him for 9 hours without his lawyer. They also refused to give him an interpreter, even though he asked for one, because he was not actually comfortable communicating in English, which was his second language, because he's actually from Brazil and he's a Brazilian citizen. So later on, once he made it back to Brazil, Miranda described his detention, saying, quote, "They were threatening me all the time and saying I would be put in jail if I didn't cooperate. They treated me like I was a criminal or someone about to attack the UK. It was exhausting and frustrating, but I knew I wasn't doing anything wrong." End quote. So the UK, these officials in the UK were threatening this journalist's husband with jail, with prison, and they wouldn't let him see his lawyer. They wouldn't even let him have an interpreter so that he could make sure he actually understood what they were saying to him. So how often does this happen in the UK? Is it rare? Does it happen a lot? Greenwald actually came up with the stats. He wrote, quote, "According to a document published by the UK government about Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act, fewer than 3 people in every 10,000 are examined as they pass through UK borders." Again, he writes, David was not entering the UK, but only transiting through to Rio. Moreover, most examinations, over 97% last under an hour. An appendix to the document says that only 0.06% of all people are detained are kept for more than 6 hours. So, end quote. So this is rare, what they did to him. And so obviously this was some type of, they were doing this on purpose. So they also forced him to give his password to his laptop computer and to his cell phone, saying that if he didn't give them the passwords, that he would be arrested. They then confiscated his computer. They confiscated his cell phone, also some DVDs, a video game console, and memory sticks that he had. The British government has not said when or if they will ever return the property that they stole from him. So they held him for 9 hours, again, under the detention power of the Terrorism Act, which, according to the British government, is supposed to be used for, quote, to determine whether that person is or has been involved in the commission, preparation, or instigation of acts of terrorism, end quote. All right, I want to take a second here to again talk to some people who may not like Glenn Greenwald. I know there's a bunch of people on the left and on the center left who do not like Glenn Greenwald. But really, folks, really, do you seriously think that Glenn Greenwald is a terrorist? Do you think he's a terrorist? More so, do you think that his husband, who's not even reporting this stuff, do you think his husband is a terrorist? Do you think that journalism is terrorism? And if you do, look, if you think he's a terrorist, then I have nothing to say to you. I don't want to say anything to you at all. You are beyond talking to tell you the truth. If you think he's a terrorist, stop listening to the show. Seriously, turn it off. I don't care what you think at all. But look, what happened to his husband? What happened to his husband? It's exactly what Greenwald has been reporting on all this time. The potential and actual abuse, the vast abuse of government power. If the mechanisms for abuse of freedom and liberties are in place, if those mechanisms exist, and they do, without absolutely insanely strong and transparent checks, if those checks aren't there and the mechanisms are there, that abuse will friggin' happen. It just did. And look, if you do not think that this whole NSA thing is important, if you don't think that a journalist's spouse being detained under a Terrorism Act is important, again, I don't know what to say to you. But if you don't, okay, just allow me to present a hypothetical for you. So what actually happened here? The UK, Britain, the top ally of us, the United States, our top ally, held the husband of a journalist hostage with the threat of imprisonment under their Terrorism Act for 9 hours. That's what actually happened. The actual journalist in the actual scenario, Glenn Greenwald, was reporting on privacy and civil liberties abuses. And then privacy and civil liberties abuses happened to his husband. But let's go to the hypotheticals, shall we? So this is what actually happened here in August 2013. That happened. That occurred. Let's do the hypothetical. Let's fast forward to, say, early 2017. And say, for some example, there's a journalist who happened to uncover a secret, crazy, anti-choice legislation that's hidden in a military bill, maybe, or something like that. This journalist uncovered this massive bill to take away all women's right to abortions. And say in 2017, Sarah Palin, or Rick Perry, or, I don't know, Rick Santorum is the president of the United States of America. And say, for example, in this hypothetical, that God came to them in a dream, and God told President Sarah Palin, or President Santorum, or President Perry that it was their God-given duty to protect the unborn and to go after anyone who is pro pro-choice and pro-abortion. Not only that, but they were to go after the family members of people who are pro-choice and pro-abortion. And then they, President Perry, President Santorum, decide to have their top international ally intimidate and harass the reporter's spouse. I shouldn't be having to make this argument. Really? I mean, seriously, I should not. It should be absolutely, positively obvious. But you know what? It doesn't even have to be a journalist. Because you know why? Because President Santorum and President Palin got the internet records of everyone who's on Planned Parenthood's mailing list. They also got the phone numbers of everyone who's ever called a Planned Parenthood office. But who cares? It's just metadata. It's just metadata. It just shows who called who. It only gives the phone number of everyone who ever called a Planned Parenthood office. You can expand this out for any single solitary cause that matters to you. Left wing or right wing. This is really, really nonpartisan here, folks. When the mechanisms are in place for horrific abuse, it is only a matter of time before that abuse takes place. The abuse took place this weekend in London to the spouse of a journalist who covers civil liberties and privacy. And if we do not take actions to stop this now, who knows what journalist or activist or spouse might be next? We'll be right back.